Michael from myrod.com, and today is Unicorn Day. I have 3 unicorns behind me. They're 1967 K-code HiPo's. The emphasis is actually on 1967 because that's the rarest thing about it. It's the last batch of HiPo's ever built. In 1967, Ford only made a handful of HiPo's, and most of those went to Carroll Shelby for his GT350 builds. But 489 of them went to the general population. So let's put that into perspective. In 1967, Ford built 472,000 Mustangs, 472,000. And out of that number, only 489 were HiPo, non-Shelby HiPo Mustangs. So to understand how big that number is, or small that number is, think about this. 1 out of 1,000 Mustangs were HiPo non-Shelby Mustangs. Think of a parking lot with 1,000 cars in it, and only 1 of that 1,000 cars is a HiPo. That's how rare that car is. Now, if you look at the numbers even further and you look at 4-speed HiPos built in 1967, Ford only made 205 fastback 4-speed HiPos. And wait for it, Ford only made 34 4-speed HiPo convertibles. They made 50 in all, 50 HiPo convertibles in 1967, ultra rare. Only 34 were 4-speed convertibles. So this is ridiculously rare. Now, HiPos in general are, of course, rare. If you look at the first 2 years, 65 and 66, in those 2 years, they made a cumulative total of 12,741. So that's 12,741 65, 66 HiPos compared to only 489 1967 HiPos. Here we're talking about a ratio of 25 to 1. There's 25 65, 66 HiPos compared to every 1 67 HiPo. So what that means is, if you were searching for a HiPo to buy, you'd find 25 65, 66 HiPos before you found your first 67. And we all know how hard it would be if you were looking for a HiPo to find 25 65, 66 HiPos, much less 1 67. So they're ridiculously rare. And in fact, these 3 cars, when you unwrap these 3 cars a little further, when you go into the history and the documented provenance of each of these 3 unicorns behind me, they're actually ghosts. They're the type of cars that are in some dead man's collection. You'll never, ever see them. But we have them here today, and today our focus will be on unwrapping just one of them a little bit more, and it's this gorgeous 1 of 50, down to 1 of 34, down to 1 of, I think, 22 when you talk about one of the rarest, most expensive of all options that ever came on a Mustang that's in this Mustang. We're going to unwrap it a little bit further. Let's talk about this absolute unicorn/ghost of a Mustang. So I mentioned this car came with the most expensive option that you could buy in 1967, and it's called competition suspension. Highly sought after, and not to be confused with heavy-duty suspension. It's a 1967 option only, and 195 Mustangs would get that option, and only 21 convertibles. And in addition to that very special suspension, you'd get these 15-inch wheels with these super cool hubcaps. These are the same hubcaps that were shared with a very special run of Galaxies called the 7-liter XLs. Those cars had 428 motors in them. So yeah, they shared these super cool hubcaps, and yes, that's factory for this car. Super, super cool. So this guy who ordered this car not only knew to check the box for a hyper performance package, he knew to get the competition suspension package as well. So effectively, when he also added the top loader 4-speed, he got Ford's secret sauce recipe for an out-of-the-box race car. But wait, there's more. Come check out what's under the hood. Take a look at that. That is the ultimate performance technology, bolt-on technology of the day. And what's super cool about this is the very guy who's documented to have purchased this car new is documented to have purchased that new Also, directly from Studebaker, Paxton Division. He purchased that before the car arrived. Immediately bolted that on, and in my mind had the ultimate sleeper of the day. Can you imagine pulling up to a red light back in 1967 and seeing this gorgeous little hub-capped 67 springtime yellow convertible, and then him giving you the race whipping of a lifetime? Oh my gosh, would I like to have seen some of the history that this car no doubt lived. Okay, so I think clearly we established that the 1967 K-Code HiPo is a ghost. Super, super rare in the world of vintage cars. They don't get more rare than that. But why is that? Why did they make so few of them? Why did Shelby not make a convertible in 1967? That's right, there is no Shelby convertible in 67. You had to wait to 68 for that. And by that time, the great K-Code was already gone. So, in 67, you may not know that if you ordered a K-Code, if you checked the box for the HiPo option, you were forced to also get the GT package. That's right. There's no such thing as a 1967 K-Code without it also being a GT. All 1967 HiPos are also GTs. That's really cool. Not the case in 65 and 66. You can get a GT HiPo or a non-GT HiPo. But in 67, K-Codes and GTs were forced as one purchase package. So the car got very expensive. And if you added any options to that at all, it became substantially more expensive than a standard Mustang. So they made so few K-Codes in 1967, and a lot of it had to do with cost, as I just mentioned, and then some of it had to do with the fact that Ford just quit emphasizing the famous HiPo. They were pushing towards something else, the S-Code, the Big Block 390, in response to the Firebird and Camaro coming out with the Big Block. So that was their new performance car, if you will, from 1967 and on. Too bad. Of course, the consequences are that the K-Code is substantially rarer, substantially more valuable. Although S-Codes are cool and nice and a lot of people love them, there's no way to compare it to the rareness of the 67 K-Code HiPo. So right, if you have a 67 K-Code, you have a ghost, no question about it. And I have 3 of them today. I mean, that's amazing. And all these years of being involved in vintage Mustangs, I never expected to have 3 1967 K-Codes at one time, but I do. Okay, I want to also mention that I'm going to be doing a video on these fastbacks, the lime green former drag race car and the candy apple red one owner car. We call it the Colonel, after the Colonel that bought it new. And that car is probably the best unrestored vintage Mustang I've ever seen, period. It just happens to be a K-Code HiPo, and that car's not far behind it. So the details on both those cars you'll find super interesting, because I just don't think you can find more interesting cars than these cars behind me. And the owners themselves were super interesting. They purposely purchased very special cars, and then they embarked upon decades and decades of ownership where they loved and doted over their cars and enjoyed them and documented the history. And so come back for those 2 videos. I think you'll enjoy them quite a bit. Now, if you have a 67 K-Code, or really any year HiPo, and you're interested in selling it, contact us. Tyler and I probably are better known than most folks for this type car. We love the treasures, and people come to us from all over the world for this type car. So we'd love to help you out, help you get top dollar for your classic car, your special K-Code HiPo. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Click like, subscribe, check out the channel on myrod.com. I think you'll love what my son and I are doing with these very, very special cars. Adios.